Today we're looking at Hedera Helix, which is also known as English ivy. Hedera is Latin for ivy, and helix is Latin for spiral. Hedera Helix, or English ivy, was actually first identified right here in Virginia. English ivy comes in two forms. There's the juvenile form, which is your ground cover. Typically it will have a couple of lobes and it will have light white veins. As it starts to grow up trees, fences, it starts to take on its adult form. In the adult form, the lobes become one lobe, typically. However, it's not unusual for it to maintain a couple of lobes as it's growing up the tree. English ivy is invasive because it's not natural to North America. It doesn't have any natural predators and it doesn't have natural disease. Also, during the fall and winter, it doesn't die back, it keeps growing. A good analogy I like to have when I think of English ivy is it's like the hypertension of vegetation. The reason why is it's really the silent killer. When it actually starts to affect our trees and our habitats, it's almost too late to correct it, because by that time your branches are falling down, your trees are falling over, and at that point it's almost too hard to eradicate from an area. Here is an example of our tree that is either in our backyard or out in the woods in our riparian barriers, and the tree is growing and thriving. Well, then English ivy comes along. Normally it starts at the bottom, the base, as ground cover, which starts to take away the nutrients in the water so the tree doesn't receive it. Then, as it starts to take on its adult form, it begins to grow up the trees. And it spirals around. And as it's spiraling around, the ivy is actually growing faster than the tree, so it's beginning to suffocate the tree, which means it's not receiving its nutrients and it's slowly starting to die. And then it will start growing around the branches, cutting off circulation. And then as a big storm comes along, these branches are dead, so it's very easy for them to pop off as the winds come along. And or if it's old enough, the whole tree will just become uprooted and fall over. A couple of ways to control and eradicate English ivy is number one, through education. We want to let the public know not to buy it, because what happens is you go ahead, you buy it, you plant it in your yard, then it begins to grow. If you happen to live near woods and or riparian barriers, it's going to slowly seep into those woods and riparian barriers, and it's going to slowly start to take over all of the native plants. It's also important to note that this is a regenerative plant, so if a piece of it breaks off and falls onto the ground, it's going to start a new plant. It's not going to die once it breaks off. There's two different ways in order to eradicate the ivy. If you have ground cover and it's a monoculture, meaning there's no other plants mixed in with the English ivy, you can go ahead and do the rollback or the carpet method. Typically with that, people will take a device such as a saw. Sometimes people have chainsaws if the English ivy is really bad. They go ahead, saw it back, roll it back like you would roll up a carpet, saw some more, and keep rolling it back. Another way to eradicate English ivy is in the adult form. It's called girdling. When you girdle the tree, you're going to take off about 4 to 6 inches of a section of the English ivy. You want to make sure to be careful to try and not nick into the tree as much as you can. And it can be hard at times because your English ivy actually grows into the trees, so sometimes it's harder to take off than you think. The Virginia Native Plant Society actually has a large list of natural alternatives to English ivy on their website, so that's a great resource to check out. However, there is the Allegheny spurge, there is the colonial oak, as well as the plantain leaf. And if you really want to put a vine in your backyard, you can do the Virginia creeper. You can find these and buy them at the local nurseries. Virginia creepers tend to have about 5 leaves growing off around them. They do grow fast, as any ivy does. However, they do die back in the fall and the winter, and that's a great time to prune them and to keep them in control.